Hello and welcome to the Victress podcast. I'm Dr. Elisa Marino and I'm joined with Erin Hazelbaker. And today we have a special guest, Carrie Winhoven. She is the principal of St. Philomena Montessori School. And we are so excited to be talking about the principles, the fundamentals of Montessori and how they can be integrated into the home. We all know that no matter where you're at in your parenting journey, whether you're just starting out or maybe you have several kiddos by now, that it can be so helpful to reevaluate. We're especially getting right in the beginning of the school year, how we can create a more peaceful atmosphere at home. And how do we do that? And I'm very grateful to have Carrie's expertise. She has 25 years of Montessori education experience. She has her master's in education. She has over 7 certifications in Montessori and Catechesis of the Good Shepherd. We'll explain both what those are. And she's already started a farm school from the Montessori way, and now starting another school here and taught all ages, preschool up to high school. So thank you so much for being here, Carrie.
You're welcome.
Yes.
It's great to be here.
I just have to say, every time I'm around you, I feel just so uplifted and edified, just the way you carry yourself and the way that you interact with the children. It helps me to be aware of how I carry myself, how I speak to my children, how, what I'm doing with my body, all of that impacts how children respond to us, and so, we'll go through certainly some of these principles, that you've brought and how to really lay a good foundation, in the home. But really today, we just want to give a lot of hope to all the moms, even dads, parents, those that are listening, maybe even educators as well, or even grandparents. Maybe you're, around challenging children. You have, a child with behavior issues or just children in general. One thing that has been so helpful to me when I'm going through a challenging time with my children is like reminding or being aware of what is normal and typical behavior for children at that age. Yes. And how challenging that can be, because you think, I remember specifically, I think he was 4 years old at the time. It was kind of like, grabbing things and wanting to steal and you're like, oh, that was typical, that's normal for a 4-year-old. And I'm like, what? You think this groundbreaking thing is going to ruin your child forever, So principles like that. And I just want to give a lot of hope to the moms out there, because we know how challenging it is. Erin has 5 children. I have 4 children. If there's a mistake to be made, we've probably done it, and we're going to make more mistakes. And so just know we're coming from that place. We always need to learn, and we always need to create a more peaceful and calm environment for our children. So without further ado, would you like to kind of share, what's maybe foundation number 1?
The dignity of the child, really. They're not adults, so, and their needs. And that's the beautiful thing about Montessori, is that, she observed children and recognized their natural tendencies and then, honored those tendencies. So being aware of that can make us more patient sometimes. With the children that we're living with and working with. And, they want to be independent. So that might be one place that I would start. They come to us dependent.
Yeah.
A baby is born and they need our care and our attention for, 24/7. And we don't get some memo that says, oh, the bell is ringing. Now they're ready to be independent. It's a gradual process, but oftentimes the child is ready to be independent before the adult, and we don't recognize that. So that's something, it empowers children if they can do something themselves, letting them do that. And, we do that in the classroom, but you can do that at home too. And you might be surprised how capable they are, because we all know that our children are watching us. Our every move, and they're picking that up. So you might think they're too young, but it's good to ask yourself the question: can they do that? What can they do? Can they pack their lunch? Can they put their clothes? Maybe have a hook at the door, and they can take care of taking their coats and putting their belongings away. dusting, sweeping. They want to help. They want to be like mom and dad.
Absolutely. Absolutely. No, I
So
think that's really important.
letting them be independent, that's one. Even when they're very young, even like, 3-year-old. A 2-year-old oftentimes is me do it, right? Those are some of their first, phrases that they'll say.
Yeah, absolutely. And so that was foundational. Why don't you just share briefly, because I was pretty ignorant of Montessori and what that means, and I would say we're really kind of in a whole revival of school and what that means, and we're all kind of questioning a little bit, our school systems, and Aaron's done homeschooling in the past, and we grew up with Catholic school, but we've been in public schools, the whole gamut, right? So what is Montessori? What does that mean? And even Catechesis of the Good Shepherd, you've kind of melded those together.
Sure.
Can you just give a quick background?
Of course. Montessori, I like to say, it's a noun and a verb. It's a person and it's also a method. So Maria Montessori was born, at the turn of the century, and she did not want to be a teacher. There were very few options to women at the time, and she wanted to be a doctor, and was very persistent. She was fortunate to be in a family that she got well educated, but she was persistent. She wanted to be a doctor, and she had to actually ask permission from the Pope in Italy at the time. She was born in Italy. She was the first female to ever pursue becoming a doctor in that country. So it was a rough road. She had to do some of her training by herself because she could not be in the company of men as she was getting her education. So she persevered, and she became Italy's first female doctor.
Sure.
And, that was looked down upon. And so the first position she got was actually in an insane asylum. And at the time, there were many little children that were there. And she noticed that. And she tells the story of watching these little children. They were in a room that was empty, had nothing. And they would be playing with their crumbs of food. And, some of the other staff was like, oh, can you believe they do that? And her heart was like, oh my, I think that they are seeking stimulation, mental stimulation. So she started to read research at the time, and anyways, started to observe children and started to work with these children. And over time, taught them, and they took I'll call it standardized test of the day, and it made breaking news that these children outperformed other children after working with Maria Montessori and, the materials that she made. And she thought to herself, why aren't other children doing, just as well or better? And she got that opportunity. And so she had that science mindset, that doctor mindset of, I'm going to observe, I'm going to, try things and see how they work. And that's how she approached things. So she got an opportunity in the slums of Rome because many of those poor people were working. They couldn't take care of their children, and the children were kind of running rampant and creating some problems in the slums. So they allowed her to gather them together in what she called the first Casa dei Bambini. So that was the first, the children's house. And that's where she started to implement, teaching children and observing children, seeing patterns. And what's unique about Montessori is over time, after watching hours and hours of, observing and working with children. So the children created the method. She watched them. And then she even made materials that would be helpful. So, and started to explain, different patterns she would see in children, like, the sensitive periods for language, young children having a sensitive period for order, like a 3 to 6-year-old. And what that means is when a routine is different, or when something in a room is out of place, that's noticeable to them. Their world, it rocks their world a little bit. And that's any child. So I find it fascinating, really, that, and that's why I say it's based on the Montessori method, and Montessori approach to education is based on, the human person. And that's why it has endured, over 100 years in countries all over the world, in cultures, different languages, because it's a method of educating the human person.
Sure. Don't you think it's so opposite of how we think as adults and as parents, but then certainly how traditional schooling is more like the educator knows best or the parent knows best, and it's our job to shape the child, almost not even, in whatever fashion that is. It's almost completely backwards from the idea of observing the child and thinking through, like, okay, this is what they're demonstrating to me right now. I just shared this morning that my son, who's 1, had found a pack of gum and opened up every piece and was like looking at him, putting it in his mouth, tasting it, and then spitting it out when he realized it was too minty. And it just kind of makes me think now, okay, how could I kind of turn that into a different experience, and maybe a sensory experience even for him, even at age 1, versus the idea of, no, that's wrong, you shouldn't be doing that. You know what I mean? And kind of that, that mindset is how we're typically responding.
Right. That's an excellent example. And that's what we do as Montessori teachers every day, all the time, is when we see, especially if we see a behavior that, you're, like you said, oh my goodness, they just chewed all of the gum. But that's telling you they're exploring, they want a sensory experience. So, approaching them of, oh, it looks like, you're enjoying trying this. Would you like to try some other foods today? But let's put this away. Or, something like what's appropriate, and what isn't. But honoring, they had this innate curiosity. I mean, children, they're beautiful. And we don't have to, and we recognize that beauty when we take a step back and we observe and we ask ourselves, what is their behavior telling me right now? And looking at and approaching them more as a guide. That's a lot better way to go about it.
I think too, as a parent and just as a mom, a lot of times, and I don't know if there's other moms out there, I'm sure there are, that have this experience. And my husband and I had this discussion just the other day, is that you sometimes find yourself as a parent in this trap of like, oh, just, well, just get through this phase. This is a really hard phase, but just get through it. And then they'll be a little bigger, and then there'll be this, and then. And it's really interesting to flip that a little bit. And if you're thinking about like more that mindset, just like you were saying, of, oh, wow, this is really interesting. What is the behavior telling me? What, how could we kind of shape this a little differently? Now, there are some days that are really hard. Moms, we all know this. And most of the time, when you wake up, it's a good day. The sun is shining. You can go outside. You can kind of learn. I think it's a different mindset to kind of flip that and be learning more and just observing, rather than, trying to like squelch the gum wrapper opening and, kind of, no, you can't do that, because if you're doing that all day long, that is awful. That is where you kind of get in that mindset of like, oh, he's a toddler now. Oh gosh, just wait until they're a little older.
I would say the challenging part is, at this stage, usually when they are younger, or even when they're older too, how am I setting myself up for the day to be prepared for this? Because I need to be ready to be patient. I need to be ready to, be at my best, right? And it's hard if you haven't gotten a good night of sleep, or somebody was sick, and
or if you're always distracted too, don't you think? I think that's one of the things that we're finding so often in this world now, is there's either always, well, I find myself
just this morning, I was listening to a great podcast and I wanted to continue to listen to that. I was just in that mindset. I'm listening to it, and my son comes up and he wants to start grabbing, the clothes off the hangers. And I'm like, no, stop. And then I'm like, wait a second. The only reason I'm frustrated right now is because I'm distracted, and I need to pause what I'm doing with the podcast in order to allow him to, enjoy and help me. He wanted to put the hangers up, he wanted to help. But if you're not cautious of that, of always having that distraction, we talk about this all the time. That's why it's important for us to kind of put our work to the side and say, okay, I'm working now. I am not working right now. I am putting that to the side. This is not an emergency. It can wait, because otherwise you are constantly in that busyness and distracted. And then you can't observe. You can't take the time to help your children too.
I think that mindset is challenging because it's like you were saying, we've kind of been taught, I'm the adult, I'm the one in charge, you will do what I say, and there's a certain amount of like, we need to have the respect for authority, and you're teaching that, but you're modeling that with the level of virtue that you have, that they want to follow you and they want to, be obedient, to you because they love you, and they're seeing that example, and you're using your leadership, your responsibility, for good, and that's definitely challenging to do at all times. I will say that. But, can I set myself up? Obviously, if you were, you have a baby that is 1 or 2 months postpartum, right? Like, just pause this and set it on your schedule for a couple months. You need to sleep, and there's times that you are just going to be in survival mode. But like, if you're at a point where you can be ready to kind of set yourself up to a better routine, what do I need to do to prepare myself for the day? Get my mindset right with probably some prayer time, and what do I need to do to set the day right so that they're not coming in and it's just chaos from the start, right? Have you had that experience? Have you seen that?
I think we don't want to miss those gems, and so if we have that mindset, and really what we want and what the children want, it's really the same thing. Most of the time they're just being a child. They want to do the right thing, they might want your attention, but a lot of times, they're acting out of, their age of development. And so if you approach things, some different strategies you can use, one would be to try to say things in the positive. So instead of what you don't do, like what do you want to see them do? So, so I'm just thinking of the gum thing, instead of saying, we don't chew gum at the house. So if you see something like that, saying, oh, remember, we have snack after lunch. So you're coaching your child in a positive way. So, here at school, instead of saying, don't run, we always say, oh, we use walking feet. So using the positive. And even we do something here in Montessori called grace and courtesy lessons, and those are easily done at home. And what we find is, children, they really do want to do the right thing and do it well. And sometimes they don't know. And so, they do the wrong thing, they get in trouble. And that didn't go well for anybody. It didn't go well for the child or for the adult. But just teaching them. So, for example, we when we're at the table, we ask, for something to be passed to us or something. And then you model that. And then you'll be amazed. You'll see, that happening at home. So if something's, I always feel like the children are my best teachers. And when something's not going well, they're telling me, I need to pay attention to that. Like, why is it not? Do they not know? Do we need a grace and courtesy lesson? Something along those lines. And that can be done at home too. What does that look like? What does that sound like? Model it.
Sure. I think explain too, one of the things, and I'm kind of jumping a little bit, but just something that's just resonated as we've kind of been talking is something Lisa and I've been working on, and I know everybody in America has heard about, decluttering, or, creating a peaceful environment, or, some type of, organization strategy, you name it. We've all been hit with, Instagram and, Pinterest posts and things. But will you talk a little bit more about what that means from a Montessori perspective? And then, of course, how we can kind of integrate that in our homes?
Oh, great. Yes. We call the classroom the prepared environment. And in Montessori, there are three components that are equally important, and that is the child, the teacher, and the environment. So it's not just like teacher in charge. It's those are all equal. So the prepared environment should be beautiful, simple, peaceful. So we don't have a lot of clutter on the walls, for example. We have like white shelves. We have beautiful baskets. We display things. We use glass. We use breakable things because we're going to be more careful and because it's beautiful. So you can do those same things at home. And definitely, I made that mistake as a parent who, didn't have Montessori education when my children were little, and I had a big toy box. It was just chock full of toys, and it was just a hot mess. I mean, they had toys, and they didn't treat them very respectfully. I now have a grandchild, and I set up my prepared environment when he comes, and I have little baskets or trays, and I maybe have 6 different items, and he's to use that and then restore it. And that just teaches care, consideration. Less is so much better. And you can you can switch those out as often as you see they need to, maybe weekly. So you can have your toy box, but put it in a closet in your room and rotate those things. That would be one strategy.
I think that's really great. We find that, I think all of us do as parents, the Nerf guns get out and they explode everywhere. Or, I was just thinking of that, in our living room now, all of a sudden it's like kid toys everywhere. It's like, how did that happen? Like, what just happened that we have, all of these things out? So I think that'll be a really great strategy for us to use. I was thinking also of the prepared environment, back to the gum story. It's like, okay, well, this was like a learning experience for me. He climbed up on the chair and he's like, oh, wow, what a wonderful opportunity. I've got some gum to play with.
You just invited him.
Yeah, I did. Yeah, we all kind of, and so it's kind of thinking through those things, probably the night before when you're getting ready for bed and as you're kind of cleaning up and getting the kitchen ready, because there are seasons in my life when I'm able to wake up early and kind of, do the house and kind of have my prayer time and things. But in this season in my life, usually the baby's waking me up. And so it's important to be thinking almost a step ahead of that. And I think that's really important. You're not adding another thing to your plate. You're just kind of observing and kind of paying attention. Okay. Oh, there's a pack of gum sitting out. I know what that's going to get used for. So instead, what could I have even sitting out so that it's, oh, this is fun and exciting, ready to start the day.
I think it's important to not internalize that, to take it to like, that was my fault. Why did I put the gum there? Like you said, we're learning, and be patient with yourself. That was my advice from the priest of the confessional the other. Are you patient with yourself? It's like, no. So as much as we want to be patient with our children, we need to be patient with ourselves. And
Absolutely.
to not expect perfection, from us. Of like, we're learning too. And that was a learning experience. And, we always say, even in business, when we're not losing, we're learning, right? And how much, we need to learn, and God is showing us, how to be patient with ourselves and rely on God's grace, and not to just don't touch anything, just leave everything where it is. I think we just, when we get so overwhelmed and there's so much going on and, baby's crying or whatever, it's, we can't handle another, we're overstimulated ourselves, right? And so how much more can we bring, peace to that, like you're saying, simplicity and less, and right. So maybe you're doing this one room at a time, and so like, that's kind of where we've kind of just focused on the family room, and they know exactly where things go. Our basement, that's kind of where we keep our extras.
And so, yeah, if they sneak down there and they find the extras, yep, it explodes. But they know where things are supposed to go. So if like I know, if that family room area can be put, at least put away, it gives me peace of mind. They can wake up to a, nice environment. So maybe we're doing that one room at a time, so it's not so overwhelming. Because I know it feels like I have to do the whole house, and nothing's gonna go well until the whole house is put in order. That is just not realistic. And I would say the second point to that is forgiving yourself and forgiving your children
Absolutely.
frequently
Yes.
on the daily, for sure. Because, and I think I heard it one time and it just struck me. Somebody was like, as a parent, you almost have to expect that the people that are closest to you, your own children, are going to not necessarily physically hurt, but hurt you or insult you or, offend you.
Oh, they draw it out of
every
you.
day.
I have older children, and they point things out, and I'm like, oh, point taken.
Yes.
They will observe and let you know also.
Yes,
Yeah.
that you have to be willing to accept that and to suffer a little bit of that. Of this is where they're learning and they're testing and things of like, okay, just to expect that a little bit, but also to then forgive them, because we know that they want to. They want to do the right thing, and we want to do the right thing, and forgive yourself for those mistakes every single day. Because otherwise I'll find myself that I'm like, I have that tendency to want to, either lash out back at them or just negatively, I'm expecting the negative behavior right back instead of like, whoa, clean slate, he is a child or she is a child. Start back over. I'm not parenting from that place of dignity. I'm parenting from like, you've been terrible for a week and I'm still thinking you're terrible. Like you never reset that expectation. Does that make sense?
Oh, yes. I've been in Montessori 25 years, and every single day I can reflect on, what went well today, but, what didn't, and what didn't, and that's okay.
Yeah.
And that's okay.
Yeah.
And, is there anything I can do different tomorrow? We can do that at home as parents. Same thing, what went well, what didn't, I wonder like why it didn't. I wonder if there's something, a different approach that might help next time. So back to, apparently your child, he's very capable of climbing. And he also, likes let's say his snacks. So, maybe you're reflecting at the end of the day and then you come up with, and maybe, he likes to wake up early too. And so, maybe there could be like an easy to reach, little cupboard with a snack that is appropriate for him to just wake up and get his little bowl of whatever, Cheerios, and sit down and eat them,
Sure. Yeah. Yeah. I think those are always the things that, as a mom, because I have 5 children, even when I had 4 children, they were younger. It's like I'm always thinking of ways to make them more independent, because that's just part of life.
It's the only way you can survive.
Yeah, surviving. Yeah, it does. But it's more the idea too then that now when I see them compared to their peers, it is interesting, and I kind of do wonder, am I giving them enough chores? Am I giving them enough things to do? Am I, whatever. And my son, sometimes it's just an act of love now that he wants me to make him a sandwich. He can make the sandwich. He knows how to do it. But sometimes I'll say, Mom, will you just make me a sandwich? And so that's fine. I love doing those kind of things, but at least he's able. He's 7. He knows where everything is. He can get everything out and then he can put everything back away, and then make the sandwich. But the idea too is I love the idea of independence. I love the idea of peace in the home. I love the idea of having that environment established. Is there anything else that we're kind of missing that will just make our lives as moms just kind of more calm and the ability to kind of handle those crazy things that happen during the day too?
I just think when there's a problem, like having like inviting them to like have family meetings, we do that in the classroom. So, and they can start with, compliments and acknowledgments. It's just a good time. Usually, here it starts with prayer, and then they can bring up a concern. and then you can brainstorm solutions and, go forward together. So kind of that we're all in this together. I think that can help.
It sounds like a great idea, because I think you're inviting them in to just like pause a minute and reflect. And we all know how powerful that is. And we were just talking about that, reflecting at the end of the day. And, so the idea of kind of coming together for a family meeting is a great idea. I know Wednesday nights in this area, we are very blessed in that pretty much everything is put on pause so that you are able to go and have a night. They call it's like a religion night. So for us, in this area, that's a night where, sports have to be done by 5:45. There are no games scheduled on Wednesday nights. It's just done. So finding a night or a time when your family is able to just pause can be really, really helpful. Now, we came from Cincinnati and there was nothing like that. Even on Sundays, everybody had, games and things all day long, on Sundays. But I think figuring out a way to just carve out that little block, because how nice is it to like sit together? I was actually just thinking about that myself. Like, what are other ways as a family that we can kind of, all be together? Because we do have a wide variety of ranges. I know there's other families that have larger families, but we go from 13 to 1. And so to kind of figuring out ways to kind of bring everybody together isn't always easy. I love the family meeting idea though, because we can reflect on that. I can just imagine some of the things that they'll be talking about. What went well? Oh, dinner was really good tonight, Mom, but it was terrible last night.
Well, yeah, helping them, or they get to meal plan,
Exactly.
They know what
I
they
love that
and,
idea.
Yeah, absolutely. All of the things that you want them to be independent, because that was going to be my question. Like, eventually they will be 18. How do you take a 4-year-old and be like, oh my goodness, how are they going to turn out, when they're 18 years old? But maybe even, meeting with your spouse first too. How do we want this environment to look like? How do we want our home to feel like?
That is so important, Lisa. I'm so glad you brought that up. I think that we've lost sight of that in some ways. And one of the gentlemen that I listen to pretty frequently and read and just kind of follow, he talks about the idea of you have to create and envision and know what your ideal is, right? So nobody's ideal is the mess and the stuff everywhere and the screaming kids and the, running. It's just, how do we reverse engineer that? And I think that's so important. What do we want this to feel like? Does that mean that we have to limit the amount of activities that our kids do? Does that mean that we we need to push a couple of them to get into some activities because they need to get out of the house? Does that mean that we need to, with our younger ones, establish an earlier bedtime? Does that mean that we need to, whatever it is, you need to reverse engineer that. I think that's so, so important, because sometimes we get stuck in, at least the way that, my husband and I, over years, I'll recognize it. I feel like I can read him sometimes, and I'm reading him and I'm like, oh boy, he's over it. He is completely over it. And so it's like, okay, we have to reverse engineer it. How can we, figure out a way to get peace without just, oh, we need to take a vacation, or, we need a date night. And now that can be true also. It is important to prioritize your spouse in that way. And it's also important to figure out, how do we create the home environment that we want? So you're not just always trying to escape that. So I'm so glad you brought that up, because starting with that foundation of, your spouse and, kind of getting that established is so important. And then incorporating those family meeting times. I love that. I think that's a really great way to start. And sometimes it feels so overwhelming. That's why it's so important to bring in your spouse, because as a mom, we get so wrapped up sometimes in the craziness, that it is important to bring in that spouse. Or maybe your spouse is the one that's, wrapped up and, oh, this feels terrible. And you can kind of see the way through. So
yeah, I always invite that in, because we're just built differently. And my 2-year-old knows that. She is in this phase of like, he's a boy and he's a girl and she's a girl, and like, it's like, she knows we are built differently. And so my mind is in 1,000 directions, and, just having to keep, tension with a lot of things. It's just the way we were built. So I welcome my husband's input and his
100%.
opinion, because he can see things clearly when I'm, in 1,000 different directions. So I welcome his direction and his input, and not as a, and I want to, prepare an environment and a home that is pleasing and welcoming to him. And then, so, but it is really challenging when you're overwhelmed, and it's been a challenging day, that you feel like, I've done everything I can, I promise, to keep things in order, but again, depending on where you're at, because it's really easy if you are, in a phase where you were, really struggling, to, again, forgive yourself, let go of where you're at right now. How am I going to make steps forward? That's why it's important to have a spouse that can help you be objective. Okay, this way did not work. I see what's not working. I'm going to be objective about this, not emotional, and to say, here's what we need to do to change, or let's try these first 3 things, of what we're going to try to do to change and move forward, because it's really hard, when you're emotional about, I'm such a bad mom, and nothing ever works, and, all of these things that we tell ourselves that are lies, because we've gotten stuck, in the past and in that rut, and have that mindset instead of the vision. Where are we going? Where are we moving towards? And are we moving in that direction or not? And I think it's really important, if you're in that place, to stop, take a night, go out to dinner with your spouse. Okay, we're really struggling, and I need you to help me see clearly, how are we going to make this change to move forward? So I think that's really important, because it's easy to get caught up in the emotion of it, and
The emotion, and then also just, when you have multiple children, one child even, it doesn't matter how many children really you have, the focus has to be on them so often. We have to take care of them. They are dependent in most ways on us. So I think just kind of pausing to reflect on that is so important. I'm glad you mentioned that, the objectiveness, oftentimes, of our spouses. We know that this episode is mostly going to be female listeners, and I think that that's so important to us, that we kind of understand that too, because oftentimes our spouse will say, I'll just do it like this. And sometimes that feels offensive to us. We're like, well, wait a second. You didn't consider A, B, C, D, E, F, G, and you're like going all through the list. And he's like, no, like this. And you're like, you want to feel offended, where you should just kind of listen and say, wait a second. He just saw all, and he, and so it's so important to value that, and not immediately put up your guard, but you didn't see what happened at 9:00 this morning, when it was crazy, so it's kind of taking that step back and allowing him to be the person that he is too, in that way.
And it's such a gift to our children when there's a united front. I mean, that's one of the best gifts you can give your children is a great relationship with your spouse. And so taking the time, you're doing great things for your kids when you do that.
Well, and I also think it's important too that, yes, there's a time that my husband and I need to go away to have these discussions and kind of have some quiet time, but it's also important that the kids see us. I don't want to say bickering, but having a disagreement that is okay, because they know that we love each other and we're coming back together. And the one time we had a disagreement, he thought that I needed to have dinner ready earlier. It was ready. It just didn't have the cheese on it. Okay. It wasn't that big of a deal, but he said, now what are the kids going to eat? We got to go. We have to be hurried, and we were both wrong. But we were having an argument, and the kids said, oh, Mom, you and Dad, you don't ever fight. You should have been. Why was he yelling at you? Why were you, and it's like, we weren't even yelling, but, they need to see us fight and then come back together, too. So I think that that's important too, is kind of still having that relationship there and allowing them to see the disagreements. But again, it's not like, we're yelling and screaming and throwing plates and things. It's just like, why didn't you have the cheese here? Well, I'm sorry. I stopped to pick up the cheese. We're here now, but it's just funny how that happens sometimes. And it's important too for children to see that also.
How you resolve conflicts,
Absolutely.
But we'll say we know from Genesis, story of Adam and Eve, it is our tendency to want to take control
Absolutely.
to try to micromanage everything, and to let your husband lead and let him come in.
I'm sorry, I should have had the cheese there sooner.
Right. We all have to, recognize what we can do to improve. But so let's say all of that, we're working on our marriage, we're working on the environment, bit by bit. We're starting to donate some toys and create a, peaceful environment. And, we're recognizing their dignity, we're doing the things to be patient and to observe, right? We still just have this really challenging child. And maybe even they have, we've got this spectrum, right? Or we're working through, is there something going on? Is there not? Or, how do we navigate that for those really challenging children?
I would recommend getting resources.
Yeah, sure.
And one of the best resources I would recommend would be the book Positive Discipline by Jane Nelsen. And it you can go by like what issue you're having. So maybe it's biting, maybe it's, whatever. And she gives some strategies. Because if parenting was simple, we would all be really, we'd be experts, right? And it's not. And if there was one, surefire way that this is the answer, somebody would be making a whole lot of money. But the truth is that we're complex humans, and our children are too. And what works one day may not work the next day. So the more, I call it, the more variety of tools you have, the better. So just some of the things, that we use here, if a child, giving a child two choices that are acceptable, so they still are exercising some freedom and autonomy. So if instead of asking, so instead of saying, because otherwise sometimes children are told what to do, like a lot all day long.
Yeah.
Pick up your toys, get your coat, we need to leave, put your cereal away, whatever it is. But instead, so anytime you're ready to tell your child what to do, ask yourself, how can I frame that as a question? Like, what do you need to do before we go? So, or it's cold outside, so what do you need to wear? So instead of put your coat on, so asking questions, kind of, you'll get better engagement and cooperation.
I think that's really important too, because I have a child that's always, kind of, well, he's probably like me, where it's like, oh shoot, it's time to go. Now I forgot my water. Now I forgot this. I need my hat. Oh, I forgot my shoes, and you're kind of like at the last second. And so I love the idea of, kind of giving maybe 10 minutes ahead of time. We're leaving in 10 minutes. What do you need to be ready to walk out the door? Even I would set my alarm to do that myself too, because I think it's so important to give them that, kind of that question. Okay, what do you need? Again, creating that independence too, instead of just handing it all to them, or, being frustrated that they can't figure it out at the last second, or being frustrated that then they push back when you say, where's your water bottle? All of those types of things. That's great advice.
I know mornings can be really challenging trying to get out the door. Do you have any suggestions for that time period? Or any time trying to
bedtime, morning time, and this is more for, let's say, a younger child. I remember, we were having issues when my daughter was little with bedtime, and so we made a bedtime book, and she just cut out pictures of like a toothbrush, storybook, like the things that were going to be her bedtime routine, right? Brush her teeth, get on her pajamas, read a story, go to bed, whatever it was. And then all of a sudden it became less about us and her, and it was like, oh, it's time to get your bedtime book out. And she had made it. So, there was buy-in. And then she would read her bedtime, like she could look at her bedtime book. Oh, now I need to brush my teeth now. And it wasn't like telling. That ended up working really well. So you just keep experimenting.
Right.
Like Maria Montessori, you observe and you experiment until you get something to work well. Or maybe it didn't have to be a book. It could be cards. Maybe they do it in a different order or something. But that can help with routines. Like, what are the steps?
Yeah.
can can they draw a picture or something, and then okay,
Sure.
Um,
That I like that because last year I had made, these pretty, they weren't perfect, I'm not that crafty, but these little like kind of, they could open and close their routine,
Yeah.
and undo it for the day, whatever. But maybe that was what I was missing. I made it for them rather than them. They love to cut, they love to use tape and glue and all the things, right? Maybe it needs to be this year. They make their own. And what do you want your
I love
routine
that
to look
idea.
like?
Yeah.
Maybe that's what I was missing, because it was
You
like,
can
why are
try
they
it.
doing this? This is so cool. They thought it was cool, but like it wasn't their own. So it's
And
great.
a strategy that I've found that's very effective also is what I would call two acceptable choices.
Yes. Yeah.
So I'm trying to think of a situation.
Oh, certainly like shoes in the morning, or outfits or things like you can wear this or this. You can put on these shoes or these shoes. You can
You can do it yourself,
choose.
or I can help.
Yeah, you
Yes.
can
You
choose
choose,
eggs
you know.
or sausage.
So what do you do when they
know?
run the
Yes.
other way? And I'm not choosing any of those. What's going on there?
Well, obviously the choices didn't work.
Yeah.
So, if they're out of control, you need to model control.
Mm.
It's easy to escalate
That's
ourselves.
the challenge. Yep.
So, maybe just saying something like, but, this is easier said than done because we might be in a moment where we all need to get out the door and you don't have
Yes.
time to do this.
Yes.
But, maybe just, I'm going to sit here until you're ready to go or something, if you have the time and the luxury.
Yes.
And just model like breathing, when a child is very much, they're not able to self-regulate their emotions because they're not in that space.
Mm-hmm.
No words are going to be real effective right then. Okay. And
Right.
definitely ultimatums are not. So, if you can model calm and maybe just repeat the same thing, I'm here for you, when you're ready to be calm.
What is going through your mind in that case? Because a lot of it's easy to take it personally and like, either I'm a bad mom, or why are they so bad? Why are they doing this to me? Or like, why can't I, what's going through your mind? Obviously it's easier to be a little bit more detached, but even as a teacher, these are, I'm in charge of these, I have to show them.
And you think,
I'm
what did I
supposed
do
to, yeah,
wrong?
why am
are they
I such a bad
reacting like
teacher
this?
that they're not, yeah. So how do you stay detached, in
I
that
think
moment?
it's important to remember that children are not little adults, and so they're actually practicing self-regulation.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a process. And so if they are, kind of out of control or having an out of control moment, that it's not a direct reflection on you
Right.
or your parenting, or
Can you
you're
say
not
that
doing
again?
something wrong. It is not a direct, they are a child.
Yeah.
And it's okay for them to be a child. Is it okay for them to run and throw something and be disrespectful? Right. No. And so, that's if you can model calm and, I'm going to be here until you're ready, or, when you're ready, then we'll, and being clear what that looks like.
Sure.
Modeling it yourself. A lot of times I actually just start to pray. And so they know, I just sit down quietly and I might start to say a Hail Mary.
Yeah.
Just very quietly. And the less you even talk to them, they'll eventually probably just come over and sit beside you.
Mm-hmm.
And they are then,
Sure.
calm. And then you can say, are you ready? Or do you need a hug? I mean, sometimes actually when they're like really out of control, if you just say, do you need a hug? and that really helps. So trying not to, and we feel it. So we know what that feels like, right? When we're starting to feel like inside, we actually need to take a deep breath and model that. That's a gift we can give the children who we're with.
Right. So what do you do then? Okay, now it's escalated for them. They're hitting, or they're about to destroy something, like you have to step in and keep them from doing something harmful.
Yes.
Right. So how do you handle that?
We call it the 3Ds: dangerous, if they're being dangerous to themselves or others, destructive to something, or distracting and disruptive to someone.
Yeah.
So if there's a 3D, it's an immediate step in. also depends on what what the
Sure.
nature of the situation is at that moment. But if they're being dangerous, I mean, you need to stop the behavior.
You're right.
If they're climbing on something and that's not safe, that's not safe. We keep our feet on the floor. If it's a 1-year-old who's scaling the wall.
Sure.
And just short and clear and sweet.
Okay.
That's not safe. We keep our feet on the floor. The less words, we use way too many words with children. Just be real clear, and you can say it in the most loving tone you have, but real clear.
I think my problem is almost always the negatives of, I'm going to have a hard time. Like I'm going to have to be thinking through, which will be good because it'll give me pause and it'll slow me down to don't hit, is what is coming up. Don't bite rather than we don't use our mouth for biting, or something like that. Or we use our mouths for chewing, or something like that.
Food.
Yeah, food. Yeah. But it's like even that slowing my brain down enough to think, okay, what's the positive here rather than don't. I think the other thing that is important as you're reflecting later, not in that moment because it'll come out as a yell then or something, but later. Oh, shoot. We did go to bed too late last night. Oh, shoot. I do need to back up our routine, because it's whatever, soccer season now and we went to bed too late and we've got to, back this up. How are we going to do this? So it is important to reflect, but not in the moment, because if it comes out you're going to be, that's when you went to bed too late last night. See, and then it becomes, it becomes almost like you're kind of ramping up rather than, again, just that calm, I am in charge. I am calm. I am the parent. I am modeling this behavior,
And like you said, relying on God's grace too. I mean, I've listened to some of those talks too before where, there are just certain tendencies that we have that will only take supernatural grace to be able to be overcome. As try as we may, we need to rely on God's grace, to improve those areas that are maybe the most frustrating or challenging. Am I surrendering that part of me, to the Lord to improve and allow Him to help us? and that's where we see, that, we have the ability to choose correctly, but we forget they're first God's children, number one. And I need to, again, learn to be patient with myself. The other thing I find really helpful is allowing more time. Like what I think of like, oh, we had 10 minutes. This is great. We'll do and it'll get out the door. And it's like, we need to double that time because something either pops up or, I need to allow them space to process, make the decision, do it themselves, that they're learning how to tie or whatever. I mean, it just is going to take more time. And so that means, yes, we're doing less things, but we're doing them with good order, with patience, right? And it's just, I just have to accept that in my mind that it's going to take twice as long as I think it's going to.
Again, allowing, even thinking about having an outside observer. So if somebody tells you something like that, like my husband the one morning said, you cannot wake the kids up at 8:00 to go to 8:30 mass. You cannot do that. Like, yes, it only takes them 5 minutes to get dressed and out the door, and they are not ready. You cannot do that to them. You do not do that again. And it was funny. It was like, I was, what? I kind of immediately.
But I was doing the right thing.
Right,
and,
exactly.
Yeah,
but
let
we
them
were
sleep.
going to
And,
mass.
yeah.
I was letting them sleep in. We went to bed too late last night, but we still wanted to go to 8:30 because that's our favorite church and, whatever. And so I have A to Z of why this was still okay. But he's an outside observer almost, in that moment, because he's seeing probably the way that I respond, Monday through Friday when he's not really there, and then it's like, oh, shoot, yeah, I do need to allow this. I do need to, so it's important to kind of, not that your spouse is an outside observer, but again, whether it's your spouse, whether it's your mom, whether it's your sister, whether it's your friend, and they see something, it's okay to kind of, you have to think of things objectively too. We just get so emotionally attached to those things too. So I think that's where you have to rely on God's grace for that as well, to kind of be okay with some criticism and okay with, oh, wow, wow, I don't do that very well, in that humility too.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, so we've talked about a lot about the dignity of the child, allowing them and helping them to foster their independence, making sure that the environment is peaceful and simple and welcoming and beautiful. I love that. Am I inviting beauty, and am I allowing them to see the beauty of our home and our home environment, and of course working on a relationship with our spouse, and then being patient and calm and in control, with those challenging behaviors. We haven't touched too much on just kind of the physiology of what we see, in the medical role. Just want to touch on that briefly, just because I want to give a lot of hope, because I think we have a lot of parents of like, this is just the way they are, or there's nothing else we can do, or that's what I've been told.
Oh, yeah. I'm so glad you brought that up, Lisa, because I think that's really important. It's important for, hopefully, if we have any teachers that are listening, and to really kind of focus on there is hope. I think even just, I was reflecting just as we were talking through this, and the idea too of, a typical classroom is, completely decked out in posters, and you go in, and it almost is overstimulating, like as you're kind of looking through that. So it's like, first let's think of the low-lying fruit. That's what we call it. When you go to pick apples, you don't pick the apples from the very top of the tree. First you grab the ones that are right here, easy for us to grab. So let's talk about some of the low-lying fruit. Is my child overstimulated in the environment that he's in? Period. End of story. That's very simple. That's a very simple first step. Second thing is, what is going into my child's mouth from the second they wake up in the morning to the second they go to bed at night? We have gotten in a habit lately of lots of snacks. So it's like, okay, they want snacks because they are hungry, or they are moving more. They're swimming, they're running, they're playing sports, they're outside, they're moving. So they do need to have more food. And are the snacks that I'm providing, are the things that I'm setting out, allowing them to be set up for success? Or am I just setting myself up for a crazy afternoon, evening, night, bedtime, then morning time being a mess? Am I setting myself up for success? So very simply put, reducing the amount of sugar that goes into your child. And that is an intentional choice that you make as a mom.
Mm-hmm.
If you get up and start the day with a, fruit, what are they called? Fruit and grain bars. That is just pure sugar you're being put into their body. Same thing with most cereals. So when you flip it over, you are lucky to find one that has less than 9 grams of sugar, when you're like going through the store. So I have to make that choice of, looking for things and looking for options, making sure, okay, I have to work in the morning. I'm not going to be there for breakfast. What are some things that my kids are going to be able to easily grab to take and go, rather than, sugar to start the day? Another thing that, just becomes so important is sleep. And that is just so vital. And what are ways that we can help with that? Well, the biggest thing that we talk about, because we're in the summer months and as we wane and get into, fall too, kids have to see the sunshine, and they certainly have to see it before they see a screen in front of their face. So, this is not the 3 a.m. child that's teething that, it's the middle of the night and we have to calm them down and, okay, we'll watch a show. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about the day in, day out. They need to see the sunshine. If they're an early riser, my son and I go on the back deck almost every morning because we're early risers. He's going to be up before the sun, so we watch the sunrise together. If they're, not going to be up for the sunrise, they need to see the sunset. We have to allow them to get their circadian rhythm going, and we are the ones messing that up. We're messing it up with the lights that we have in the house. We're messing that up with the screens that we're showing them all the time. These are the things that we can do as moms. So just 3 very simple things, to start out with is, what does my environment look like? Is it way too overstimulating? When we think about a classroom, I mean, that's the easiest way to kind of think about that. But then certainly, in our home, do I have way too many options for my child when they wake up? From the second they wake up, they're like, this is too much. The second thing, of course, is food, and just what is going into my child's body on a daily basis. And the third thing is sleep. And then, of course, that sunshine and circadian rhythm. We're so quick to jump to melatonin or a supplement or, things like that. But what else can I be doing? Can I be turning off all lights in the evening as the sun goes down, all overhead lights, and just have lamps on? have they seen the sunrise? Have they seen the sunset? All of those things are so vital. So these are the 3 things that are just so simple that we can just start with to get our children kind of in the right direction. Do you have anything else, Carrie, that you would like to add to that?
No, I do think it's important to think, what are we feeding our children? Not just food, but, their minds and all of that. So the screens, I definitely think there's a book called Spoiled Right, and it talks about the need, and spoiled just stands for, the fact that they need to be outside, they need to play, they need social time. And it's not necessarily, let's say, that screen time is bad, but if they're spending time on screens, they're not doing that outside piece. So, yeah, I would agree with all of that.
Well, I just want to thank you so much for your time today and for your insight and just for helping us to kind of simplify things too for moms. I think that's so important that we're able to just kind of take the time to kind of slow things down, allow our brains to slow down a little bit. And so we thank you so much for your time today. And if anybody has any questions, certainly, you can reach out to us here at Victress. We can definitely put you in touch with Carrie. But I loved her resources. And so we'll definitely have those linked at the bottom. So if you have any questions, please don't hesitate to reach out. That's something that Lisa and I and our Victress team is really good at, is also kind of helping you to kind of look down and figure out, okay, why am I crazy? Why are my children kind of out of control? These are things that we work on all the time. So we're happy to kind of help you walk through that too.
Yeah, we'll definitely share the books that are in there, and then probably the Montessori website, and as well as Catechism of the Good Shepherd, that you'd be able to find one that is close to you. So thank you again, Carrie, so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me.